making a better tomorrow. A murderer was captured this morning and tried today. Guilty. Sentence, death. Execution tonight at 6. All net, all channels. Would you like to know more?
It's kind of scary, right? That's kind of basically where we're at now.
Yeah, there's a great New Yorker essay about Starship Troopers that if you haven't read, you should check it out. But it's basically just like, oh yeah, this is what happens. We're in Starship Troopers now, minus the bugs.
Well, I mean, the bugs are just, COVID and mass shooters.
Yeah, the scapegoat, right?
Right. Oh boy.
Welcome to Film Trace, folks. This is a podcast where we trace the life of a film from conception to production all the way to release and reception. It is another season, another cycle. We're doing Future Wars, and this is episode 2. We're focusing on it's episode 4. I screwed that up. It's the 1990s.
Yes.
We're doing The Matrix and Starship Troopers with a special guest, Evan from Spoilerpiece podcast, Spoilerpiece Theatre. Evan, introduce yourself. Let us know what's going on, man.
Hey guys, thanks for having me on again. I've been on Film Trace a couple of times and had a great time, so I'm glad to be back. I'm a co-host of a podcast called Spoilerpiece Theatre. We review new release movies every week, and our tagline is, we don't give a shit about spoilers, we just want to talk about the movie. So we just dig into films, be it blockbusters, indies, kind of all over the place in terms of the types of movies we review. And we just like to dig into it. We talk about what we want to talk about, and, spoilers be damned.
Spoilers be damned. I love that. I was trying to see what the last episode you were on with us. Was it Cabin in the Woods and Teeth? Was it that?
Yes,
That feels
right.
like so long ago.
Self-aware horror.
That was our first cycle when we changed the format. It was a fun one. All right.
Was
The Matrix. How do you want to dive into this, gentlemen?
Oh my gosh.
It's a tough one.
It's
a minefield.
It absolutely is. I'm curious to just kind of talk about our histories, not just with the first one, but the franchise as a whole.
Ooh, okay. You want to go there?
Yeah, without getting too deep into it. But we did briefly talk about The Matrix back in the first episode of this season because in the 2020s, obviously, the franchise returned with Matrix Resurrections, and it's so crazy to think about how much of a roller coaster it has been for those of us that went to go see the original trilogy in the theater, and and then with all that time that passed and everything that changed with the genre of sci-fi, of talking about AI, which was the focus of that initial episode because we talked about the creator, and my biggest takeaway with my latest rewatch, and I feel like I've rewatched this every few years just because it's so rewatchable. For me, it was just how weird this movie is. Like, it's a bizarre film, especially one to have kicked off both a major, blockbuster franchise as well as the careers of these auteur siblings. I'm so curious to dive in. So when I started with The Matrix, I was 16 and completely enamored with it. Saw it in the theater a couple times with friends, with my brother, and then had a horrible time making my way through Matrix Reloaded and Revolutions. And then all the time passed, started watching the original Matrix regularly, and was super psyched to watch Matrix Resurrections. And I thought it was okay.
Yeah, it wasn't that bad.
I didn't hate it. I didn't love it. What about you? Let's let our guest go first.
Yeah, guest goes first. Give us your history.
Oh, shucks.
Yeah.
So I didn't see it in theaters, but I think we're around the same age. So I remember seeing it maybe like a couple of years after it came out and really enjoying it. And then that was right around the time that the other ones were coming out in the theater. So I did go to see Reloaded and Revolutions.
Yeah.
They're all our names, so I'm just trying to make sure.
Yeah, that's right.
I saw those in the theater and actually really enjoyed them at the time. And then, upon having a little bit of distance from it in the following years, I ended up watching the first one again and didn't really watch the other ones until the new one came out. What was it? What would you say it was called? Resurrections?
Yeah, Resurrections, yeah.
So I went back and revisited them, and I was like, okay, they're all right. They're still kind of, they take things in a weird direction and I don't think it all kind of like wraps up effectively. So I was kind of glad that they revisited with Resurrections, and I enjoyed that one. And I was glad that they did it, but I don't really know where we go from here.
Yeah, it's like it's kind of at an end point, it feels like. I remember the night that I saw this. Now I'm correct in saying this. I have to go back and look, but so this came out in March of '99. I went opening weekend and the opening night. So it was like the Friday night when it opened, because this is before they did Thursday previews. The entire experience is like seared in my mind.
Nice.
Like, it is one of my favorite movie-going experiences ever. Like, I walked out of that theater like a changed human being. I was like, what the hell did I just see? It just like, for me, it scratched like every itch that I didn't know that I had. And I was like, this is unbelievable. I absolutely, I adore the movie. The sequels and stuff, I don't like. I tolerate. I saw them in the theater, super disappointed. But like, to be honest with you, like, I kind of knew they weren't going to be good, because it had been like 4 years since this had come out, and doing them 2 back to back, I was like, this is never going to work. The first one, it's probably one of like my favorite opening half hours of any film, where it has very noir, cyberpunk, and it just almost it creates such a rich world that you never want to leave it. And I was like, it's just such a feat what they did. I do wonder, with time, it's tough, because I loved the first one so much. I did not like the sequels, and Resurrection, is kind of a meh for me. You can take it or leave it. For some reason, when I rewatched this, it was actually today, it didn't take anything away from the original. The fact that I didn't love the sequels and stuff. I don't know what your experience was with you guys, but am I safe to say that we all loved The Matrix? Evan, did you love it?
Oh yeah, for sure.
And so like the post script of all these other sequels and stuff, has it taken anything away from it from you?
For me, no. I think that's definitely a notable kind of exception to the rule, except, the one kind of other, and it's also sci-fi franchise that comes to mind, and we'll get into it in our 80s episode, but like, regardless of, what you think about the varied quality of all the Alien films, I still feel like the original Alien film is something like on its own. I can always go back and just rewatch that. And I have a great fondness for Aliens as well, so it's not quite the same factor or ratio of good to bad as we have with The Matrix, or good to okay. Because I think it is worth mentioning that I remember not hating Reloaded. But I remember just like completely just like sinking into my chair. I have a very visceral memory, not of seeing the first Matrix, even though I know I saw it a bunch of times and loved it, but of Matrix Revolutions, and just like sinking into my theater chair and just being like, this is where we're going.
Dude, me too. I was in London when I saw it, and I was like, I want to leave. Like, I want to like walk out of this theater. Like, I felt like ashamed for some reason. I don't know why. I don't know why. Why is that though? It's like, what? Evan, you like the sequels, didn't you? When you saw them?
I did, yeah. I think I was really responding to the action set pieces, especially in Matrix Reloaded. I think it has some really entertaining action
the car
pieces,
and
like
highway
the
stuff.
stairway fight, highway stuff. Yeah, all this stuff was just really compelling. And I think upon rewatch, I liked it better than Revolutions and was able to enjoy it more because it's so action driven.
Yeah.
And I think the pacing of it is what worked well on rewatch, and maybe that's what I responded to originally when I watched it.
Yeah.
And then kind of getting back to your initial question about the first film, I feel like I can watch it and enjoy it and don't have to think so much about the sequels.
Yeah.
But I think that's because when they made it very smartly in a way that it was kind of an ending that could just be an ending to the movie and you wouldn't necessarily need sequels because at the time I'm sure they just weren't banking on the idea that they were going to make more of these. And so I think when I watch it, I'm like, it feels like a self-contained world, and I can watch it and enjoy it on its own and not even kind of have the sequels in my mind at all.
Right. I think going back to another thing that's what you guys are saying is making me think of, especially regarding to like action set pieces. The theme of this cycle of episodes is future wars, right? We were looking specifically at sci-fi films that are both kind of futuristic in nature, but also like basically predicting some kind of mass uprising or battle between forces, largely, intertwined with the themes of technology and the advancement of technology. And the thing that like makes me, I guess, wonder, maybe I'm putting the cart before the horse, but like one of the things that I truly love about coming back to the Matrix nowadays is, not just seeing it as this kind of commentary that also has like amazing, like iconic, like standard setting set pieces for action filmmaking, but that it has a really like dense, like full of possible interpretations allegory with regards to not only AI and like self-identity and the hero's journey and all that stuff, but also like autobiographically from the Wachowskis as an allegory for, discovering your true gender and their own exploration and, affirmation, confirming their genders as trans women. And that feels like a whole other aspect that just, I wondered, I had similar plans to you, Evan, to rewatch the sequels in advance of Resurrections coming out. And I just watched the first Matrix again right before Resurrections. And I was like, yeah, I think that's good enough. I've
dipped my toe in. That's all I really want to.
Right. But what is it about? I don't know. Going back to like the self-contained idea, the action set pieces, like I think it also goes back to what I was originally saying about how strange this movie is. Like,
I'm surprised that you didn't realize that when you first saw it.
No, for whatever reason, it felt like, it was so different. Like going to see a movie in the 90s as a teenager, where I was like super impressionable, and I was just like basically told, through marketing and through like motion picture soundtracks, like what was the standard, what was the norm. And I just really thought that it was just like a cool futuristic sfi fi with Hong Kong kung fu action. But like even saying that out loud, 24 years later seems silly.
I just remember the opening, like the opening, like 15 minutes. I was and being in the theater, like, well, what the hell is this? Mm-hmm. Where did they shoot this? Like, number one, because it didn't look like Los Angeles or any place they normally shoot movies, and the way that everybody was acting, the action sequences, it just, like even Carrie-Anne Moss's what's her name, Trinity, her outfit. I was like, this is just feels bonkers to me. Like I'd never seen anything. It had hints of like mid 90s action movies going on and maybe like Hackers or whatever. Yeah. But, there was something it felt so lived in. It didn't feel like a put on.
Exactly.
It felt like the people that made this kind of live in some sort of world that is a deviation of this. And I don't know, like that's the thing that stuck out to me immediately when I was watching. I was like, oh, this is something different. And by the end, it kind of gets a little bit cliche, and you can feel whiffs of the sequels at the end of The Matrix. But like it for some reason, it just holds together so well for me, even after all of these years. I don't know Evan, what sticks out to you as something, you talked about the action sequences in the sequels that you kind of latched onto as being, amazing. And what is it about the first one that, still to this day, you hold something, it holds you?
I think it's obviously the action, that's definitely one of the things, but some of the stuff that Chris was talking about, that it's there's a lot of layers to it. You can access it in a lot of different ways. You can access it on a purely visceral action movie level, where it's super entertaining and very cutting edge in its effects and its ideas that were duplicated and copied by many other films, parodied endlessly. I mean, I can't even count the number of Matrix parody sequences I remember, where someone jumped in the air doing the crane kick and froze in midair. Bullet Time and Max Payne and things like that sort. But it's also just a really fascinating film that explores so many different themes, as you mentioned, gender identity, oppression, like fascism. There's just so many layers to it, and that's what I respond to in watching it again and again. It's got all the great entertaining action set pieces, but I feel like there's more kind of like layers to peel back and in places and ways to kind of access the story. And this time for me was really thinking about it a lot more in the context of the trans allegory, and the writer directors exploring their own gender identity and kind of seeing the places that it kind of seeps into the film, and ways that it kind of, the story is taking off on that and commenting on that. So that for me, the most recent viewing was just kind of like soaking in that layer of it and just appreciating it on that level. And especially like the cinematography this time around, just the kind of layers to the cinematography and the way that it kind of, when you first go into Matrix, it has this kind of like dingy, like greenish hue, but as the movie goes on and Neo becomes more kind of like awakened, his time in the Matrix is like brighter and brighter and brighter, and you feel like he's gaining like more control and competency over like his abilities in there. And so that was something that I was picking up on this most recent viewing.
I think we all have like good like critically, what's the term I'm looking for, rich views of the film. But one of the things that sticks out to me at The Matrix, and sort of living with it for the last how many years it's been, is how much like Fight Club, which came out this year as well, 99, has this sort of strange following around it. That like, even to the point where, in the alt-right movement, like red pilling somebody is a whole thing. Like, what do we make of that? Because it's like, and Fight Club's the same way, where, you read the book Fight Club and you see the movie, well, obviously it's a critique of fascism, right? But then you have somebody watch the movie and they're like, oh yeah, this is amazing. And they're like Tyler Durden and like Project Mayhem, and they're into it. I don't know. There's something about these movies that were so powerful when they came out that it's like the effect of them, there's a lot of unintended effect, where it changed culture and changed conversation about these topics like identity and like knowing the social constructs and specifically surrounding identity, that like I don't know, it almost kind of feels like it's maybe dangerous in some way. And I hate saying that, but that's what it feels like presenting these ideas. It's funny, like going through this and reading about like how it was made and all that. The one thing that stood out to me, because I went on to study like literary theory and postmodernism, And, probably this film is one of the reasons that I did that, because it was an introduction to those ideas. And I love that they made the cast and crew read Jean Baudrillard's Simulacra and Simulation, which is not an easy text. That was difficult when I was in school. It's very, very difficult and hard to get through. And the ideas are very, very challenging. And I always find that interesting that they were able to express what Baudrillard was saying in a pretty simplistic way. But I do wonder, did you guys, when you watched this for the first time, when you watch it now, do you feel like it's saying something from a maybe philosophical viewpoint that is unique and interesting and something that you have latched onto? Or is that kind of something in passing that kind of faded away?
For me, it was there's two aspects to this. One which you didn't mention, and then I'll talk about the whole red pill thing.
Sure.
But the other kind of aspect that I think's been more forgotten because it wasn't memed to death is the whole trench coat thing of the turn of the millennium. I don't remember if you remember this. Yeah, I don't remember. I don't know if you remember, Dan, but at our high school, that there was a group of kids, I believe, that referred to themselves as quote the trench coat mafia.
Yes, I remember.
Oh
this.
My gosh! And it was, and it's. I mean, it's not that just Matrix. There was it was goth music, and also the middle school in our district was the one that got on MTV News for banning Marilyn Manson T-shirts. There was just this really intense culture war happening back then, even before the internet really took hold and made things both better and worse. Whenever I watch this movie, I can't help but think about that and how it created this environment, especially with Columbine happening. Did that happen our senior year, Dan?
Yeah, I was just looking this up because when you said trench coat mafia, the first thing that popped into our head is because something about the Columbine people wearing trench coats.
Right.
I remember the day after it happened at our high school, someone wore a trench coat and got suspended.
Right.
Do you remember this?
It was nuts.
Columbine happened a month after The Matrix came out.
That's crazy.
Not even a month.
Wow.
3 weeks.
I didn't realize that.
Right.
That I never put those two together in my head. I was like, wait a second. That is nuts when you think about it.
They're ever linked in my mind because of what happened at our high school. And also just it's one of those things where from my vantage point, especially because I had a older brother that kind of raised me on Kung Fu and Jean-Claude Van Damme movies and stuff like that. So it was I knew I kind of had a better understanding, I think, probably than most adolescent males going to see The Matrix of just how wink wink, nudge nudgy and humorous, I think, over the top it is. These scenes that have become iconic, I think, with devoid of the humor of them opening their trench coats and pulling out all these giant machine guns. And part of it is going back to the Baudrillard thing about the simulacrum. This is them using the Matrix, the simulation, as a hero worship, gun worship kind of conduit for overtaking the agents and whatever. And so when I look back at that, and then also this red pill, blue pill thing, it's particularly kind of both frustrating and enlightening because I think it can all be distilled down to you guys know that viral tweet from, I think it's Lana Wachowski, where she does a quote tweet of Elon Musk and I think it's Donald Trump Jr. or Ivanka Trump, and it's Ivanka or Don Jr. or whatever said are you going to take the red pill? And it's the meme of Lawrence Fishburne's hands.
Totally,
and then Elon Musk says red pill forever or whatever, and then Lana Wachowski quote tweets it and says "fuck you both." I think that's just like a perfect kind of distillation of how the whole themes of the Matrix, like so many other things, from like, you know, the misreadings of masculinity in Breaking Bad to I mean, so many other texts where it's drenched with layers of dense meaning, and then it gets kind of unfortunately diluted down to this really dumb, bro-y kind of simplistic view, and then it gets co-opted, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm curious to see. I was wondering if that would happen at all in kind of a knee-jerk way to Matrix Resurrections, but I think unfortunately, especially because, you know, it came out with the pandemic and the like simultaneously on HBO Max and theatrically, that it kind of felt like a blip on the radar, unfortunately.
Yeah. It's like they did like the day and date release, and it was just, I don't know, that there was like buzz around it when it first dropped, but yeah, I don't know. There's a part of me that thinks that Matrix, the original Matrix, was just like a lightning in the bottle moment.
Yeah.
Because I don't know, the style of films that they brought together, like you talk about Hong Kong action, and just like cyberpunk, like was cyberpunk like, was that even like a thing in the late 90s that much? I don't know. I can't remember. Was that a theme of thing? Like it just felt so, I don't know, so realized.
Well, I mean, that term makes me think of Blade Runner, honestly, more than the Matrix. But I definitely think there was this kind of like coalescing. Going back to like your comparison to Hackers, where it's like the idea of like nihilism and chaos, anarchy in conjunction with technology. I don't know. What about you, Evan? What's you? I think that's an interesting term to dig into and see how it's kind of changed over time.
I'm glad you guys brought up. Sorry to just go back to the red pill thing for a second. I'm glad you guys brought it up, and because I was wondering if that was going to come up in discussion, and just kind of piggyback on what you were saying, Chris. I think it's just indicative of bad faith reading that we see across movies. I'm glad you referenced Fight Club as another example. Because in Breaking Bad, because there's just so many people out there, and I'm going to generalize and say a lot of them are the right-wing people who deliberately like and overtly misread or misinterpret things and take the wrong messages from them. And this movie and Fight Club, another one that people just take the wrong things away. They don't understand what the commentary is, and they're totally just responding to the wrong things. Glad you guys brought that up, because I was thinking that as I was watching. I was like, oh, remembering the whole red pill thing and just kind of shaking my head.
That's so gross.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, so sorry, you were asking more about the term like cyberpunk and kind of like digging into that. And I'm trying to remember. I feel like there were a few things in the 90s that were kind of like
this, right?
Like there were things like, you know, Lawnmower Man,
yes.
like things that were like kind of playing in the space of like VR and not quite understanding like what that was going to be. Mm-hmm. There were things like Dark City that were kind of, you know, weird, trippy, heady kind of movies, and other movies like in the early 2000s, like Equilibrium, which were trying to kind of like cash in on the like action-y, you know, future, you know, post-apocalyptic-ish dystopian future kind of police state thing. So I feel like there's definitely something there between like the weird like computer movies and the like insane action movies. That was kind of like, I feel like the Matrix is kind of like situated between them. It kind of like caught some of the like 90s computer stuff when we didn't really know about computers, and then inspired a bunch of, you know, action movies and things that came after it.
Yeah. It's like that. It's the mixture of the two. And there's definitely noir-y stuff in the beginning, where it's like this mystery follow the white rabbit. And like,
yes,
you know, the phone being in the, you know, in his office where it gets delivered to him. And it's like this, the unraveling of the mystery is so I found it so engaging in the opening part of this movie, and then the reveal happens. It's sort of like, oh wow, that's crazy, that's nuts, and I'm sure that's been done before. It sounds like a common like trope in sci-fi movies that human beings are, you know, taken over by AI or used for this or whatever. But I think it's, to me, like the specialness of this movie is the philosophical ideas sort of intertwined with this such a fully painted specific and unique world, but it is kind of the action that, like, I don't know, there's the action element adds so much to the engagement of it that it like creates stakes for this world that they have created. And it just, I don't know, it just grabs a hold of you. And the sequences here, you know, the famous ones, especially the shootout on the lobby, or like when the helicopter and stuff like that, or the fight with all the agents at the end, you know, there's something so visceral about those scenes that it helps the other stuff get drawn in. Whereas if like it was just like a very heady like movie about postmodernism, like I'm thinking like Scanner Darkly comes to mind.
Yeah,
it just wouldn't. Also, is that Keanu Reeves as well?
Right.
Also,
and Johnny
like,
Mnemonic,
Johnny Mnemonic. Thank you. It just wouldn't. It wouldn't last like this one has lasted, because it's just like, you know, it's a discourse. That's cool. That's fun. I would probably like it, but most people wouldn't like it, and it wouldn't. This is the cinematic elements here, like are the sugar that to take down the pill, right? If that makes sense, right? And it just, I don't know. There's something about the mixture of it here. I found it like I was floored that the other lead for this in competition was Johnny Depp.
Oh, girl.
And like it was very close. I think the studio is like really looking at Johnny Depp, but Keanu Reeves had the right vibe. I mean, like, can you imagine? That's another kind of element that I want to talk about. Like, I always find with great films, everything has to click. And this is one of those movies where everything does click. If a single thing, if it wasn't shot in Sydney, if Keanu Reeves wasn't available, if Carrie-Anne Moss wasn't available, who had like no career before this, right?
Right.
Like she's kind of picked out of nowhere. And then I was Hugo Weaving, and like,
right.
Like perfect.
I was going to mention that. Like, I was trying to think like what sets this film apart when there's so many other ones like it during this time period. And obviously the Wachowskis are the biggest piece of it, and everything that they did to kind of imbue all those elements in that mixture, like you said, Dan. But like the thing that's just incredible, and, you know, maybe this kind of goes back to your like classicist sensibilities, Dan, but but like it is it's so weird, but the reason that it makes it that it's able to like go down so easily is that it has like these really kind of perfect archetypes of not only the protagonist but like the supporting cast too. And I don't think I definitely did not appreciate Hugo Weaving's performance when I was a kid watching this movie, and like rewatching him in particular is just like he's on like another level as an antagonist.
Oh, so good.
It's insane, especially when you consider all the different like ways in which technology has become like embodied as an antagonist in sci-fi filmmaking, and also just like that the playing off. I mean, there's a reason why Keanu Reeves and Lawrence Fishburne not only like are integral to this franchise, but like they've also become one of the main reasons why you've been able to build the John Wick franchise as well. Is that the way those two actors play off each other? It's so like it's crazy that you would even like deign to think in this time period that like that matchup would make so much sense. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. There's just like, it's one of those things, like you said, Dan, it's like it clicks. And when it clicks, not just in one way, not just in two ways, but like in all these different like tandem pieces, God, I just like get goosebumps thinking about it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
yeah, I agree with you. Like the casting is really critical to. It's a critical piece that I think people kind of underplay sometimes when they're talking about the Matrix in terms of why it works so well. You know, the cast all works well together, and I think one of the things people don't talk about enough in the Matrix films in general is I think Carrie-Anne Moss and Keanu Reeves actually have a really great chemistry together. And which is, I feel like, not easy because Keanu Reeves, as much as I like him in things, probably not the easiest person to have chemistry with because he kind of, I don't know. I just like, I feel like I've seen other things like how, you know, a kind of a little bit of a goofball sometimes. Like, how do you have romantic chemistry with somebody like Keanu? But it works,
right?
I think. And that chemistry just grows over the course of the franchise.
And his profile in general is just like kind of one of the strangest stories in Hollywood, right? Where it's like he was known for his flat wooden acting in a negative way, I think largely in the 90s. And, you know, it almost feels like The Matrix is kind of like that tipping point or one step. And then like I think once again, it's John Wick that kind of solidifies him in, you know, over the course of the past 10 years as like one of the like most interesting guys to watch on screen, where, you know, all the acting, so much of the acting is internal. And yet he's like constantly like trying to like challenge himself physically. There's an interesting archival profile of Keanu from Empire magazine from when The Matrix came out and blew up. And, you know, he was doing like Much Ado About Nothing, and a lot. He was like trying to like push himself a lot as an actor. Like obviously he worked with Gus Van Sant and tons of other interesting projects, even during these time periods where he wasn't as like well regarded as a quote serious talented actor. And like a lot of the interview kind of interrogates this idea of him getting kind of like stereotyped as, you know, the dumb guy from Point Break, or as like there was like gay rumors because he played a male prostitute with River Phoenix in My Own Private Idaho, because he had a close friendship with David Geffen and they like lived together for a while. And there's just like something so refreshing going back and looking at that. And like I feel bad that like I kind of like, I loved The Matrix, I loved Speed, I loved Point Break, but I still was kind of like in this camp of just assuming that, you know, these movies succeeded despite him. But now all these years later, it's kind of like, I'm finally realizing like, no, this guy like is actually very deliberate and careful and precise. And, you know, that was just like Hollywood blowhardism at its finest, I think, back then.
Yeah. I mean, he had that's followed him until very recently. I would say to the last decade, Keanu was definitely seen as, I don't know, an aloof, sort of not all there all the time actor who, you know, I think that the tough part about that too is, especially, you know, growing up in the 90s and early 2000s, it was indicated he didn't have the chops. Right. He wasn't like a technically sound actor. But like, yeah, I mean, you watch The Matrix and sure, a lot of there's depth in his reactions that before felt shallow. You're sort of like, oh, no, he's doing something else. And it just took us like 30 years to figure it out.
He's been living in the future.
Yeah. And like, I think that's, you know, one of the reasons that they chose him too. It was clear that they needed somebody in this role who was like, one, physically committed, because it was like 6 months of physical training. And then two, the thing that really got him the role was the fact that he could understand the philosophy that they were trying to at least introduce to people. Yeah. And he was into it too. And so it's like they needed really somebody. They basically said that we need someone who's a maniac and would do this with us, and he was the guy. But that's like, it speaks volumes about who he was back then. That like he was willing to do this even as somebody who could go out and get a big movie, you know. And he chose The Matrix. It's like, yeah, this is what I want to do. But by the way, a movie from directors who had only directed one film before.
Yeah, right.
This is their second movie.
I know, after Bound, which is incredible.
Yeah,
but it's definitely like a first movie. Like it's a small kind of crime chamber film thing. I don't know. I'm curious. Like I don't know. I know that I need to go back and also give Speed Racer another try, and I know that
Cloud Atlas.
I don't know about that, but what's
I don't think
your
I've
take
actually
on?
seen Cloud Atlas, but that's
It's a trudge. What's your take, Evan, on the Wachowskis and how they were able to both convince Universal to let them do this, and also like how their kind of career has gone over the past 20 some years?
I mean, I haven't seen Bound, but I've seen some of their other movies, and I feel like I think it was Dan, you said this was kind of a lightning in the bottle situation, like seeing some of the other movies that I feel like haven't worked as well over the years. For the record, I did actually like Cloud Atlas when I saw it.
Okay.
nice.
It's on the theater. Things like Jupiter Ascending that I feel like just didn't work very well. I'm trying to think if there's something else that I've seen of theirs. I haven't seen Speed Racer, but I know that one kind of got destroyed critically, and then people have kind of reevaluated it over the years. But I mean, when I saw The Matrix, I was like, these people clearly are talented, and they have some interesting things to say, and so I kind of feel bad that they haven't met with more success over the years, and that they've kind of, The Matrix is really like the biggest thing that they have in their kind of in their resume.
I haven't never given it a try, but a lot of people swear by Sense8. Their Netflix
it's
show.
good. It's good.
Is it? Okay.
It's like it's definitely them, right? It's such like a full realization of, I think, what they were missing in The Matrix Reloaded and Revolutions, and you know, maybe some Speed Racer in there too. It's just, yeah, it's bonkers. It's like hypersexualized, but like super fun at the same time. I don't know. It's also like a really unique mixture of things. I'm not going to say it's a great TV show, but it's certainly like a fun, engaging one that's like, you know, thought provoking. So it's worth checking out. That's probably, of the things that they've done since The Matrix, Sense8 to me is by far the best thing they've done.
Okay, cool. We should probably segue on over to
Starship Trooper.
Mr. Verhoeven. Speaking of over-sexualized.
Man, this one's a sticky wicket, as they say. Just because there's almost too many layers going on, right? Because when I first saw it,
I don't know,
or not
when
enough.
I first saw it in theaters back in '97. I think I saw it in theaters. I must have seen it in theaters. I saw everything in theaters. And then remember, before Columbine, they didn't check IDs for R-rated movies.
Right.
And so if you're like 15, you can go see an R-rated movie. No one cares.
Especially you had like a beard at 15, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I remember seeing it.
I'm still working on that beard.
One day.
Me too, Evan.
I remember like walking out of the theater thinking like, what the hell did I just watch? I mean, I picked up on none of it.
Yeah.
And on my rewatch, I have to say, it's one of those movies where, okay, I saw it when I was younger. I didn't get it. I think our friend Hendrix, friend of the show, he kind of explained it to me. And I was like, oh, like this is probably when we were in high school. I was like, wait, what? And then I went back and rewatched it, and then I picked up on everything. But it took somebody who's like way smarter than me about movies to like tell me like what it was all about. And I was like, okay. But now, I don't know. I have such a weird relationship with this movie because on rewatch, I read this New Yorker article. I read all these like little essays about it and like how it was such this amazing satire. But then I watched it, in the last week or so, and I'm just like, God, it still feels like that same movie I saw when I was a teenager. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's a classic teenage boy film. Yeah. Really. The thing that before the rewatch for the episode, the last time I'd seen it was during the pandemic. I don't know if you were present for this one, Dan, but our friends, would do a Friday night. We called it dumb movie night over Zoom. And we would always argue about like what constituted a quote dumb movie, and this was one of those controversial picks where it's like, I didn't pick it, but like it seemed like a number of our friends thought that it was a dumb movie. But like Paul Verhoeven is just kind of like, he's like a classic like himbo director, right? Where it's just like I don't know how much. It's one of those things you don't know. Is he putting very little thought into what he's doing, or is he putting like all the thought into what he's doing? Either way you slice it, the guy is horny as hell, and he has this kind of like super idiosyncratic singular voice that is also just like so trashy on the surface and like gleefully so that it's really. It is hard. I don't think that makes you dumb and our friend smarter, Dan, to like be able to like look to pick apart and see what it's trying to say about like fascism and totalitarianism. But because like it's almost as if the machine of filmmaking that he's a part of is almost like taking pleasure in that fascism and totalitarianism, right? And that goes back to RoboCop, and also is true in his less sci-fi oriented films like Elle and Basic Instinct. I don't know what. Tell us a little bit about your history with Starship Troopers, Evan. I'm curious because I did hear you agree with me where Dan said he's thinking too much, and I think you agree with me that maybe not enough.
So I think you made a comment about it being a teenage boy movie, and I think I remember seeing this somewhere in that range and really enjoying it. My history is with Paul Verhoeven is that I love his movies. Yeah. He's one of my favorite directors when he is living in the land of satire and sci-fi action. So RoboCop and Total Recall are high up there. RoboCop specifically is probably top 10 of all time for me because it's just such a sharp mixture of action and social commentary. And I remember when I saw this the first time, I thought that I really liked the commentary. And upon revisiting this movie just a couple of hours ago, it was shockingly unsubtle in what it had to say, even by Paul Verhoeven standards. And I don't know, it didn't quite work as well for me on this viewing. It felt about as subtle as a bomb. It just really was not landing with me, even though I like the sentiment. I like what it's going for in terms of its commentary on fascism and war and the military industrial complex and the trademark horniness with which it's told. Yeah. But it just didn't quite work for me as well this time around. It was kind of a bummer, actually. I was like thinking I would sit down and be like, oh, this is going to be so fun to revisit this movie that I enjoyed. And then I just thought, damn, this is not as good as I remember it by a long shot.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the kind of feeling that I had on this recent watch, because I probably watched it once every 4 or 5 years since it came out. And I would say like the peak of it was like 10 years ago. I was like, oh man, nobody got this. It was a box office failure. Like he like made this, polemic and put it out for, $100 billion or something. This like, middle finger to like the industry. But now I watch it, I'm just like, yeah, man, like I get it, but and this is the hardest thing. It actually reminds me a little bit of Far From Heaven. Bear with me.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Bear with me. In the fact that like Far From Heaven was like an homage film to someone who had like a satirical style back in the 50s, right? Here it's like he's trying to do satire, but like while filming a Baywatch episode. And it just, for some reason, it doesn't click anymore for me. I get what he's doing. I get what he's criticizing. I also love the fact that he didn't really read the book that he that's based on.
This is a terrible adaptation of the book.
He's like, what did he say? I stopped after 2 chapters because it was so boring. Is what he said. Which sounds like him. He's probably lying too. He seems like one of those guys that's like makes up pull quotes.
Oh yeah, totally.
And yeah, it just look. I feel like we're doing a disservice because there is a ton of American political satire, especially from someone not a European, like making a movie here in the system. It was really a polemic when it came out. Like nobody got it. The Washington Post called him a neo-Nazi. Like he was doing something really interesting and kind of brave on some level to make a movie like this, and he is a brave filmmaker. Except for let's throw out Hollow Man. Let's not talk about that.
No.
But yeah, it it's funny because this one's landing with a lot less punch for me. But like Showgirls has become one of my favorite movies.
Oh yeah, that's right.
In a completely non-ironic way. And I just like I'm so confused by him. He's such an odd filmmaker overall. I don't know. Yeah,
I think there to kind of give a good example or like Verhoeven in a nutshell. He did a interview on the 20th anniversary of Starship Troopers back in 2017, and he one of the things that he takes issue to from remembering when the film was skewered upon its release was that this notion essentially that he wasn't really trying to do anything. He was just trying. He was like basically just the kind of soundbite was that it was quote 90210 in space, and he took issue with this specifically because he said like I didn't cast Casper Van Dien and Denise Richards because they looked like teen idols. He says, I took them because I wanted them to look like the people you see in Leni Riefenstahl's movie, The Triumph of the Will.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, and it's just like, going back to Evan's point, like that's like just, it's so dreadfully obvious today, but, and it's unfortunate that it hasn't aged well, but is it also perhaps that one of the, I don't know. I'm kind of saddened that it hasn't aged well because is it that it's so obvious today just because like, I mean, we're older and wiser and we're a lot more keen to picking apart satire, especially when it's like so over the top and in your face, like this is like Verhoeven is in general, or is it going back to the cold open of the show? Like, is it just like, is what's really happening is that we're just like feeling kind of yucky about it because Verhoeven was right, and this is kind of like where we're at. I mean, I'm not trying to open a minefield, but like the only good bug is a dead bug, and we have like Netanyahu calling Palestinians human animals, right? Like, it's nuts that we've in some ways, in some really horrific ways, gone backwards in terms of like trying to negotiate with our own like nationalism and patriotism.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one thing related to that is, and that's come up in like, and there's a couple of articles that I read about this movie where they're essentially saying that, oh, it was so, this is, it's come to fruition and all that sort of stuff. I would, not that I disagree with that point that it has come to fruition. I would say the reason that it doesn't age so well is that a lot of it became real. And like, there's a humorous irony to what he's doing in Starship Troopers where it's not funny anymore.
Yeah.
Like when you talk about stuff specifically like the response to COVID and like I would say like the conspiracy theories that propped up and like all the QAnon stuff specifically, like there's a satire of fascism or like totalitarianism. It didn't go deep enough, right? It's not absurd enough because the reality of it is so much more ridiculous than what he was showing here. That I think that's one of the reasons for me where it's sort of like it actually feels pretty mild, compared to reality. And I think that's I don't know, that's one thing that sticks out to me is like it feels like a very 90s critique of fascism when like the stakes felt probably way lower in the United States than they do now.
Clinton era.
Yeah, like there was no wars that we were fighting, people could afford houses.
Okay,
we were bombing people in other places. We're always doing that, right? We're always doing that.
We were more like that description in The Matrix when Lawrence Fishburne says, the peak of human civilization, the turn of the
well, but this goes along with that whole idea of end of history that was big in postmodernism. That at this point, democracy was going to win, and there was an alternative besides capitalism and democracy. But it turns out there is, and it's a little bit darker than people thought it was going to be. You know what I mean? I don't know. I'm going to go on a tangent. I'll stop.
I mean, I feel like this is maybe a good kind of a barreling through to the end of the episode. This concept in the sci-fi genre of like exploring what warfare looks like in the future, whether it be, a technological enemy or an alien enemy or any kind of like stand-in for essentially a foreign enemy. Is it as simple as like, look at what the U.S. administration is during that time period? I don't know, because Mad Max Fury Road at the height of Trump, or like on the precipice of Trump.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's that clean, especially with movies like this, where, like you mentioned, Verhoeven's a European and he's maybe looking at it from a more zoomed out international lens. But is it? I don't know. What do you make of this, Evan? What is the obsession with integrating warfare into the sci-fi genre? Why can't we just have a nice little movie
like
about
After Yang or something?
Yeah, or Steven Spielberg's AI artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think war movies are compelling to people in general, and putting them in a sci-fi world, you can often have an alien enemy, which is, you're dealing with superior technology, possibly superior tactics and things like that. It's a higher hurdle to overcome if you're the human race. It's easy to make movies like Independence Day where it's it's easy to side with the humans. Okay, the aliens are coming, they're trying to kill us, so we have to fight back. And I like that this movie is, we're seeing the bugs and we're seeing the people triumphing over them, but you don't feel good about it. It's like clearly like we're on the offensive, we're trying to kill these bugs. So sorry, I guess I got a little distracted from your question, but
that's fine. It's the thing about it here is, to Evan's point, it allows a director to create this heroic story, essentially. Or Star Wars, The Matrix is all about the hero's journey, like literally on it's point for point. And they just tend to do it in this like really cool like sci-fi world. And Starship Troopers is way more, I would say, problematic, because it wants to critique a political movement that happened, 50 years, 60 years before, I don't know, 40 years. What is it? Can't do math. 50 years before it came out. And at the same time try to critique, what was happening in the late 90s. And I think whenever we see these movies, it's always like obviously a reflection of what the anxieties of that moment, right? And The Matrix is all about the fear of the millennium and what it's going to bring, and like what computers are going to bring. And like Starship Troopers is all about, I think, because of this sort of political malaise that was happening in the late 90s, I think it's kind of about like, hey, something bad's probably going to happen, and this could be our response. It could be rally around the flag, you know, and like what happened after 9/11 and like the wars in Afghanistan and the wars in specifically more in Iraq. That kind of happened.
Yeah.
And he even talked about in Starship Troopers when he was doing it, one of his inspirations was George W. Bush basically, you know, murdering death row people in Texas left and right. That's where we get that scene in Starship Troopers. And so like, you know, it all ties together, but I think it's all, you know, they're all future based. It's basically a blank canvas to express what people are like terrified of in that moment. And I think both of these movies, you know, coming at the late 90s, it's fear of this sort of the new world that was coming that nobody really understood, that is too technologically advanced for anybody and we can't understand anything. And the fear that things are just going to get out of control. And have they? I don't know. Have they? I'm going to ask you guys. Have they?
Oh my gosh. I mean, I just found out today from my students, I teach high school, that there's like a thing, like one of the new viral things on TikTok is people talking about like basically doing anxiety spiral vlogging about the possibility of a World War III on the precipice of like Ukraine and Palestine and all that, and in my students' words, in the TikTokers' words, quote, the inevitability of a reinstatement of an American draft. But like this is a thing that like, you know, and I mean essentially ever since, you know, Trump did the whole like, you know, nuclear scare thing with Ukraine. I don't know. It's so weird that was just like a minor episode in the Trump administration, but like that there is a lot of World War anxiety, especially with the youth, in terms of just like feeling on the edge of something horrible. And a lot of that has to do with Trump, but I mean, it doesn't seem any more safe, like in the aggregate, you know, internationally, with Biden. I don't know. What's your take, Evan? I'm going to let the guest have the final word.
Oh boy.
No pressure.
Yeah, we're just tossing out big
pressure,
issues right now.
Yeah. Oh man. I mean, so I really liked what you guys were saying about this, the 90s and the kind of fear of the unknown and the new millennium, because that was a kind of a palpable theme that was kind of running through a lot of different movies of the era. And on the one hand, you think, okay, well, some of that fear was unfounded. You think of, you know, Y2K and, you know, how worried we were. I remember, you know, New Year's Eve, you know, on the cusp of the year 2000, kind of sitting there with my family, like watching, you know, the ball drop and thinking, oh God, like who knows what's going to happen? Yeah. Like, you know, planes could fall out of the sky and all, and then none of that happened. Right. Yeah. And so we're sitting there going, okay, well, that was kind of, you know, silly and ridiculous to be afraid of stuff like that. But then you have, you know, this fascist commentary going on in Starship Troopers, and you know, we were complacent at the time, and there has been a lot of bad stuff that's happened in the wake of 9/11, and even, you know, the last however many years of consolidation of power under Trump and the Supreme Court, and so we did have some stuff to be afraid of.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it was all like happening then too. It's like you think like not a politics podcast, but Newt Gingrich's Contract with America. It was all happening in this time period, and people were just like, oh, whatever. I'm more worried about like talking about Nazism and stuff like that. I don't know. It's a whole thing. I think ultimately both of the movies are like great expressions of the late 90s and like what people were concerned with back then. Probably not the right things to be afraid of in that moment, but you know, it is what it is. It's an expression of the time, right? So,
well, and AI right now is still a thing I think people are afraid of, and they're only going to become more afraid of it, even more so than, you know, from the Matrix.
Yeah, we did a lot of AI talk when we did the Creator show, and me and Chris on the wrong side, two opposite sides of that. Bring it on, I say.
Yeah, no, yeah. Dan's gonna, worship at the altar of an AI god. He's ready to do it now if it presents itself.
That's a trivia.
He's like, I, for one, welcome our new AI overlords.
I, on the other hand, am a high school English teacher trying to grade these fucking essays. So
ChatGPT essays. You're grading ChatGPT. You're grading AI right now.
Oh man, thank you so much, Evan, for joining us. It's a pleasure as always. And what's going on? Spoilerpiece Theatre. We've got lots of great episodes lately to dive into. I would be curious if there's like one recent-ish episode that you would urge our listeners to seek out, a particular film that your crew agreed on as one of the best of the year thus far, or one that's like super polarizing that makes for an interesting listen from varying viewpoints.
So I've been off the show for a couple of weeks, actually, because my wife and I welcomed a daughter in September.
Oh,
so
congrats.
It's been a few episodes since I've been on. But I will selfishly say one of the last episodes I was on, we talked about a film. This is episode 477. We talked about a film, Our Father the Devil, which I thought was a really interesting movie. And there was a lot of great discussion. And the kind of like short version is there's this woman who is working in like a retirement home as like a chef, and this new priest shows up at the retirement home, and she realizes that he is the warlord that was presumed dead in her home country, who like used her as a child soldier. And so she has this like really horrifying situation of seeing this guy and like trying to figure out what the hell she's going to do with the fact that she knows who he really is.
Nice. That sounds really fast.
I gotta add that to my list for sure.
Yes. Highly recommend it.
Next week on Film Trace, or whatever, 2 weeks, whenever Dan gets around to it, we will be diving into the 1980s, as we alluded to earlier. Look at Aliens, James Cameron's sequel to the Ridley Scott film, and also it's a double shot Jimmy Cam episode, his original 1984, The Terminator, as well.
Awesome. Thanks for listening.
Ooh, that'll be a fun one.
Oh, yeah, dude. James Cameron's going to be a fun episode. A lot of good back and forth. All right. Thanks for listening. This has been Film Trace.